what if the road not taken actually had a split in it? Um, what if the tapestry on the wall that we see a single thread we don't like were to be pulled and we don't realize on the other end of the tapestry something else begins to unravel? This and many other questions will be answered on this week's episode around exploring strange new worlds. Good morning. Buenos días a todos nuestros amables oyentes. Guten Tag. Buongiorno. Welcome to the final episode of this season of Exploring Strange New Worlds. I am your host, Chris Pabon, and I am joined, as always, with my co-host in everything that is Trek, Joss. Morning, Joss.
Look there. Greetings to all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. Good morning, Chris. How are you doing?
Well, Joss, I am shaken by the knowledge of what could be and what could have been after the season finale of Strange New Worlds, which delivered and then some.
Yes, and I'm just going to stay right here at the top. I will do nothing to alter my future destiny that will cause you to die a horrible death. I'm just going to say that up front.
Joss, I feel that though I do not know why, but I owe you a great debt.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Wow, I have to say, this week, the Nats need to really draft the writers of this week's episode of Strange New Worlds because they literally hit it right out of the park.
Oh, a baseball analogy.
Oh, hey, yeah, of course. Baseball, Star Trek, it's like peanut butter and chocolate. Can't have one without the other.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So, Josh, as you might remember, before we dive into the episode, last week I said I was unsure of how they could top last week's episode because last week's really felt like a season finale. But I was proven by the writers and runners of the show that, yes, they could indeed top it because this had everything and then some.
It did. It threw, it was just, I was so blown away by this. I knew the writers would do great things. I have a lot of faith in this writing team. It is the best Star Trek writing team, at least since, the later seasons of Next Generation or DS9. I'm not dissing any of the Star Trek shows. I'm just saying I think Strange New Worlds has the best, and they proved it again this week. Let's just get right into it, okay?
Yeah,
let's do this.
Let's do this. Let's fly.
Let's fly. No, hit it.
Let's hit it.
Yeah,
that's for a review in about like a year when Discovery comes out.
Yeah,
let's hit it. So we begin with Enterprise is on a basically supply run to the outpost on the neutral zone, and it's the first time in the series that we actually talk about the neutral zone, and also it's the first time in Trek lore in general that we actually see one of the bases that border the neutral zone, because we hear about them a lot, but we've never actually been to one. Well, in this episode, finally we get to see one, and they're with the Kuyoga, so we get to see Captain Patel again, which is, as a big Melanie Scrofano fan, I was really happy to see. And it starts off, innocent enough that we've established that there's a relationship between Patel and Pike, and he's coming in for dinner, and he's once again at his kitchen. He's making like dinner, and they have a nice chat. And he says, I'm making pasta buca next week if you want to stop by. And there's a nice dialogue about like he's always open to seeing what the future Captain Pike looks like, beard or no beard. Then the scene shifts to like they're talking to the commander of the base, and he seems to be very happy because they're bringing much needed supplies. They talk about like automated mining ships and other things that will really just modernize the base. And then a kid comes running in, and he says the captain of the base is clearly the dad says like, I've told you I'm working, and um, no big deal. Like Pike is there with number one and Spock. It's all very routine until the name of the kid is revealed, and it turns out that is one of the kids from the training exercise that in 7 years will cripple Captain Pike and end his life as he knows it. And so he knows who the kids are because as we've seen earlier in the season, he's done his research, but to come face to face with one of the actual kids, and by the way, there were two kids who are not going to make it, and he's one of them. I mean, it's really jarring, and it really shakes him. So he excuses himself from the meeting rather abruptly, and he's walking down the corridor, and Una catches up with him, and Una says, like, that's one of the kids, isn't it? He says, yeah, the two kids don't make it, and he's one of them. And you can tell he's really shook up about this. And Una reminds him, like, this doesn't have to be your fate. And so the scene switches to when he's in his own quarters, and he's thinking about this, and he asks the computer to take dictation, and he starts to dictate a note to the kid, which is basically like a warning, like, hey, on this day, don't show up. And then he hears a voice in his quarters, and he turns around, and it's Admiral Pike, an older, wiser Admiral Pike, which is fantastic. And he even has the maroon, like that mad maroon color from like Star Trek Wrath of Khan. And, this is just an incredible moment to like, oh my God, this is a direction I never expected. And so Pike says, I've been at this long enough to know that, I'm not going to take this on faith. And so the Admiral Pike reveals the name of his pet pony and how his first pet, which was a horse, and how he died. And so says like, does anyone else know that? And so that's where he proves it's his older self. And Admiral Pike reveals that because of that letter, it sets off a new series of events that will lead to something catastrophic for the Federation. In his own words, into the world stuff. And, Pike is just full of questions, like wondering, how is it that you're even here? How is it that both of us can be at the same moment? And so he opens up a case that contains a time crystal. And we go back to referencing the Monks of Barath, which is like incredibly cool. And, Pike asks Captain Pike asks Admiral Pike, well, like, how do you have this? And he says, well, because I was able to convince the Klingons that, we are men of honor, and that if I explain the situation to you, and it was better than the alternative. And so Captain Pike asks, well, what would be the alternative? And he says, come on, the Klingons, which, Josh, I know is great for you because you've been wanting Klingons for the whole season. And, I told you I didn't think we were going to get any. But yeah, next season, I think it's going to be chock full of Klingons. And he says, they prefer things to the point of a bat lift. And basically, Admiral Pike tells Captain Pike, I'm going to show you what happens once you send that letter. You're going to live it, because we know from the events of Discovery that you just don't see the past. You live and feel the past. And so he gives him the time crystal. Captain Pike touches the time crystal. And all of a sudden, we're in balance of terror. Josh, do you want to take it from there?
Yes. So Captain Pike finds himself conducting a marriage ceremony in the Enterprise's interdenominational chapel. Doesn't know who any of these people are. This is, put him in a really awkward moment, which usually is what happens when you send somebody through time in Star Trek. Suddenly, Spock calls out, red alert, and when he calls out, he says, Captain, this is number one. And okay, there's a surprise. Spock is now the first officer, not Una. So Pike runs to the bridge, asks Spock what's going on. Spock tells him that Uhura can tell him what's going on. And Uhura mentions that apparently 2 of the outposts along the Romulan neutral zone have been attacked by an unknown enemy. And they head to the nearest one, which turns out it is the outpost that they were just at 7 years before, upgrading its systems. The commander's name is Hansen sorry, I'm gonna miss it, but the commander is the father of Mott, the young boy that was supposed to die in the training accident. And Pike sees them there through the view screen. Somebody has attacked them and all but destroyed the outpost. Suddenly, a ship decloaks, and it is an old Romulan warbird from the 23rd century that, of course, we know from the episode The Balance of Terror, which this episode parallels. The bird of prey sweeps in, finishes off the outpost. The Enterprise is not in range to be able to do anything to stop it. Pike then has a sit down with Spock and asks for him to mind meld with him so that he could say that, yes, confirm that, yes, he has come back from the past and doesn't know anything of what's happened in the previous 7 years. And Spock does it and then says, you carry a heavy burden of the future, Chris. And so they go back to the bridge, and they are contacted by, there's another Federation starship in the area, and it is the USS Farragut, commanded by, wait for it, James Tiberius Kirk himself. For those of you who are fans of the Prime timeline, you will recall Kirk served as a young officer aboard the Farragut. He is now, in this timeline, its captain instead of the captain of the Enterprise. Pike is still in command of that. Ortega's is chest thumping that, yes, it's got to be the Romulans. The Romulans had to have been the people that attacked the outpost, but they're not trying to, go one way or the other. But then Spock, using mirror lensing, which is, I'm sorry, I'm butchering the term of this. This is how astronomers are now using light from stars to find planets. And if the light bends in a certain way, they found a planet. Well, even though you can't see the bird of prey because of its cloak, it still draws gravity. So it's bending light. So Spock is able to use that effect to track it. And he is determined that the ship is heading towards the Romulan neutral zone and home. So they do realize that this is the Romulans, and Ortega, is all fired up to hunt them down. Then they get a transmission from the enemy ship. Basically, it's a coded message, but they are able to see a visual, and of course they see what that Romulans look like. And as we know, the Romulans are a genetic offshoot of the Vulcans that they left some centuries ago during the time of Serac, the great Vulcan philosopher who created the discipline of logic. And then they have a briefing with Kirk in attendance and try to decide what to do. And Pike wants to get permission from Starfleet to attack the Romulan vessel. Ortegas wants to just hunt them down and kill them. M'Benga doesn't want to start a war. Spock finally says, no, we have to do this, because if these people are an offshoot of my Vulcan blood, then I think this likely we must attack now. And the scene is a complete remake of the original scene, briefing room scene from Balance of Terror. Ethan Peck as Spock is saying word for word the same lines as Leonard Nimoy said 50 years ago in the episode, and it's great. I don't think of it as a copycat. I think it's it's exactly what Spock would say in any timeline. And finally, Pike and Kirk agree that what their best plan is to flank the Romulans, disable their ship, and capture them and try to open a dialogue with the Romulans. And they go in there, And if you remember, anybody who remembers Balance of Terror, the Romulans obviously see the both the Farragut and the Enterprise at the last moment, just as they're going into a comet. Then does an about face, gets behind the Farragut, and attacks. The Farragut is nearly destroyed. The Enterprise manages to damage the bird of prey and forces them off so that they can rescue the Farragut's crew, including Kirk and Commander Leon, who is serving aboard the Farragut. Chris?
Thank you. So everyone comes aboard, and we have a historic meeting, which is right up there with when Qui-Gon Jinn introduces Anakin to Obi-Wan Kenobi, because we have Captain Pike and Captain Kirk in the same room together for the first time for us viewers. And so it really is like, a moment in Trek lore. And so we decide there's a dialogue, and you see the different parts to each one of them, because Pike is saying, well, you flinched, you should have fired first. You see the aggression from Kirk, and whereas you see the more cerebral Pike that's like, no, like, I could have hit your ship. Like, he is inclined to ask first, then shoot, whereas you have Kirk who's like, shoot first and ask questions later. And so we see Captain Pike in action when he says, okay, let's have a dialogue. And he reaches out to the Romulan ship, and, because he can see that they both have something in common, which is they want to get home. And so despite Kirk thinking, okay, this is going nowhere, Pike manages to establish a dialogue with the Romulans. And they agree to common ground of a ceasefire for 2 hours. And so each side has 2 hours to make repairs, bury their dead, and each side doesn't know what's going to happen at the end of the 2 hours. And we get a fascinating view of the Romulan ship, which is, again, a callback to Balance of Terror, where you see that the Romulan commander is, in essence, like, he's tired of war, and he's thinking, well, maybe something can come out of this a different way. And you have a sub-commander who's like, no, this is not the Romulan way. This is weakness. We should immediately attack. And he gets dismissed from the bridge because after the commander reminds him, listen, I served with your father in this campaign. And you know what? Yes, we talk about glory and greatness, but he ended up dead when, like, our commander at the time told him he had to attack, even though we were out of weapons and we out of shields. Let's try something different. And meanwhile, on the Enterprise, you see that they're trying to, like, do repairs, and Spock has gone to, like, supervise the repairs of the weapons array directly because phasers have taken heavy damage. They can't operate right now, and the torpedo tubes are disabled. Which, by the way, it seems like the torpedo tubes become disabled a lot. You would think that maybe in future ship designs they need to reinforce the torpedo bays, but we'll get back to that in the good, the bad, and the Gorn. And while Spock is doing repairs, you hear a Scottish voice replying back to him, which implies that there is one Montgomery Scott who's quite likely serving on board the Enterprise right now. And Captain Kirk, as we know, does not like to lose, something that's reinforced in a brief bit of dialogue between Captain Pike and Sam. He always likes to have a third alternative, if you may. And so he asked Captain Pike for permission to take a shuttle and leave the Enterprise, because he obviously has something in mind in case things go sideways. And so Pike grants this, and you see the shuttle leaving with Captain Kirk on it. And then the 2 hours are up, and it seems like Captain Pike's way of dialogue might actually work. It seems like he and the Romulan commander are coming to a common ground that is not going to be war. Until you see all of a sudden the Romulan fleet appear with the Praetor herself. And the commander of the Romulan ship is like, what's going on here? I didn't call the fleet. And the treacherous sub-commander says, well, I did, because you forced me to, because this is not the Romulan way, and you were showing weakness, so I think we need to take advantage of this opportunity. And so for a brief moment, you see Pike's way was about to work, that there might have been peace, but it turns out, as we will talk more in the good, the bad, and the Gorn, that perhaps Pike was the right man for the wrong moment. and it looks like they're about to be outgunned when the Starfleet ships appear out of nowhere, headed by one Captain Kirk. Except these are the mining ships that they have been providing for all the bases to provide minerals. And as Captain Kirk tells Captain Pike, well, we don't know what their ships look like up until now. They don't know what our ships look like up until now. How will they know this isn't a fleet of powerful like Starfleet ships? Josh, do you want to take us home?
Yes. So Pike calls back the Romulan Praetor and identifies the mining ships as Delta class attack vessels, and says that they are, quite, impressive in battle. The Praetor decides that she is going to execute the Romulan commander who initially attacked, not because he attacked, but because he allowed himself to be seen. Pike reaches out to the commander one last time. The Praetor says, "In another life, I might have called you friend," as Mark Leonard said in the episode Balance of Terror to Kirk, and that this is part of his duty. He knew he had to die for the Romulan Empire, and he's going to follow it through. And of course, the Romulans destroy the first warship, then begin attacking the Enterprise and the mining ships. Kirk manages to maneuver the mining ships in a way so that they block the Enterprise, so it can escape once Kirk is back aboard. Unfortunately, the Enterprise takes heavy damage and a lot of casualties. And among the casualties are the young woman whose marriage ceremony Pike was conducting that morning, and also Spock, and that even if Spock survives the really awful injuries he has suffered, he's apparently suffered several broken bones, a massive head concussion, a broken spine, and Chapel says even if he lives, he will not be the same. And Pike, talking to Admiral Pike once again, realizes that by changing his own future, he basically gave his destiny to someone else, because he could almost imagine that Spock is the one who's going to end up in that immobile chair, being nothing but a brain in a useless body. And so after he has a discussion with Kirk about him taking over as captain of the Enterprise, Pike touches the time stone one more time, goes back 7 years to the present, and everything seems fine. He has decided not to send Mott that letter. It's just going to have to play out. It's very unfortunate, but he has to meet his destiny because he is not going to ask Spock to do it. And he confides in Spock that when he sees him again, that, about his destiny. Spock says, "I do not know why, but I feel as though I owe you a great debt of gratitude, Chris. Thank you." And of course, fans of us know what that's going to lead to, the two-parter from the original series, The Menagerie, which if you've not seen, you really should see that. It was a great episode, probably the best one Gene Roddenberry wrote. Then everything looks like it's going well. Pike is on the bridge. Uhura is, she's still on the ship. She hasn't returned to Starfleet Academy, but she's rotating through communications, which of course we know her destiny. Then suddenly Pike gets a call from his lady friend asking him and Una to come down to the transporter room. They go down there. Una and the captain, Pike's lady friend, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name again, announces that Una is under arrest for being a Lenarian, the genetically enhanced species that we met a few episodes ago. And she's placed under arrest. Pike tries to fight back. Of course, that does not happen. They beam off the Enterprise, and Pike is just standing there in the transport room. And the episode fades to black, and that's it for this season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So, how do we feel about all of this, Chris?
We feel pretty darn good. The whole season has been brilliant, and this final episode, just bullseye the landing. So many good things.
Mhm.
And it's just, again, like the theme of the episode was very much like the next generation's tapestry, hence my "what would Q do" short for this show. Because the whole idea of like I can avoid my fate, but then I am just giving it to Spock in a way is, and I'm also plunging the Federation into war. Is in a way is like when you pull a thread of a tapestry, as I mentioned in our opening. Here it looks like, okay, this is going the way I thought it would, but you completely don't know what's happening over here with another thread that's randomly affected, and it might start to unravel. So I loved, I never saw it coming. Them bringing Admiral Pike in, and making use of the time crystal, which also is a very good way of preparing us for Klingons in the next season.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it also sort of, I mean, just so many good things. As I mentioned in the dialogue, we have the appearance of Captain Kirk for the first time, and I thought he did a really good job as Captain Kirk. And it's just a pivotal moment in Star Trek history to see like Captain Kirk and Captain Pike together, because we've never seen it. Another thing that we've never seen is we've never seen it in the outpost. We talked so much about the outposts along the Romulan neutral zone, but we've never actually been to one or seen one. And I also like that it looked far less fancy than some of the other starbase stations that we see. And it should not be looking all fancy. It should be looking like something like out of the Cold War, because it's there for only just one mission. It's not exploration. It's just like it's like a watchtower. So even like the design on the asteroid kind of looked like a watchtower. I mean, I just I also liked that they left us in a cliffhanger, which is what's going to happen with Una, which is like they head on are addressing the question of, okay, she's an Illyrian, which they brought up earlier in the episode. Like there's consequences to that. And also the betrayal, because this sort of feels like a betrayal by Captain Patel, who's like close to Captain Pike. And now the question is, what was he doing about the Enterprise? Were they some suspicions about Una, and was he like there to just like tap into the computer? I'm so excited because in the end, this kind of felt like Empire Strikes Back, because like Una has been sent to prison, Hemmer is dead, La'an is out there. I mean, it's like the core crew, like the team that Pike can rely on, is sort of out there dispersed. The good guys have taken a hit, and they're flung out among the stars and amongst the Federation. Like what's he going to do now? So yeah, there was a lot of good here.
Indeed, there was. I think this one, I think they really did something extraordinary with this week's episode, and I was so pleased with the storylines. One thing I really liked, and I just want to point this out, I love the fact that they brought back the movie era maroon uniforms. Anson Mont, if you're listening, maroon is definitely your color, buddy. He looked great in that. There is a lot of wonderful fan service here with that. I thought it was interesting that, I guess they figured at the last minute they didn't need to have somebody come in. They could just keep Mbega in the episode rather than go ahead and cast somebody to play McCoy and be aboard, sitting aboard the Enterprise. So clearly, whatever it is that Mbega leaves the Enterprise for doesn't happen in this other timeline. I also love the fact. Oh, and this is one thing we forgot to mention, was that with Spock being dead, there is not going to be anyone who can successfully negotiate the reunification of the Vulcans and the Romulans, which is, as Admiral Pike points out to Captain Pike, is universal changing things. That, he's going to do something so big in the next, with his life, that it's going to be, immeasurable, which, as we know from both TNG and Discovery, he succeeds at and brings it into hostilities with the Romulans.
It's like Pike says. Of course, Admiral Pike says to Captain Pike, he's got things to do.
Yes, he does. He has very big things to do, and he can't even let death stop him. So he has, as we know. So yeah, I also loved how it ended on such a big cliffhanger. I totally didn't see that coming. That was going to happen.
The betrayal. That's a betrayal.
Yes, it was. So I mean, I wonder. I think Batal was hesitant. I don't think she wanted to do it, but she was the only other Federation starship in the area. We don't know who dropped the dime on Una. I do not think it was Leon. But it is very possible that probably someone from Section 31, might have found out what was going on. But we will not know until sometime next season about that. There was a lot of, I love the actor who played the Romulan commander. He did a great job. I had almost expected them to recast the actor who played Sarek on Discovery to come back and play this, because just sort of another shout out to Mark Leonard, because of course, as we know, Mark Leonard played both Sarek and the Romulan commander. Interesting reason why. When they made Balance of Terror, of course, they made him a pair of Vulcan ears. And then a year and a half later, when they filmed Journey to Babel, which is the first time we met Sarek, they still had Vulcan ears that fit him, so they just recast him. It's just a good way to get around that, to save some money rather than have to make another pair of ears. And I like that. Okay, Kirk gets a lot of props in this, because yes, as we know in Balance of Terror, he has proven right that yes, it was better to attack, at that point, that, to go ahead and go in guns blazing and stop the Romulans right then and there. Sometimes like they say, there's a time to fight and a time for peace, and that was a time to fight. And I think that I also enjoyed the scene again. One other thing I want to add, I loved how Kirk mentioned that his father was first officer aboard the USS Kelvin. Nice shout out to the Kelvin timeline right there. Paul Wesley, I think, did overall a very good job. I think he made Kirk his own character. Because now we've now had 3 actors who have played James T. Kirk. Of course, we have Bill Shatner, Chris Pine, and now Paul Wesley. And I think they've all done an excellent job playing that character. I mean, he's become a character on par with Romeo or Hamlet or Abacus Finch, any of the great theatrical and literary characters. And so it's going to be up to actors, for however long we keep making Star Trek, and we come back to that character to take, excuse me, Captain Kirk in their own direction and play it differently, rather than trying to be an imitation of what William Shatner did in 1966.
Another thing I want to add on to, like, how much we both agree how good this was I like that in the scene when the Romulan Armada shows up, that there's different types of ships. I mean, there's big ships, there's smaller ships, because that's what you'd expect from an Armada. And Josh, I know I wasn't part of the Star Trek Picard discussions, but that was one thing that bummed me about the finale of Star Trek Picard. Actually, the finale from the first season, excuse me, which was like all the ships on the Romulan side and also the Federation side all looked the same. I mean, just pretty clear. You could see it was like computer generated. Okay, give me a dozen of the same looking ships. And like here, it looked more realistic that you have like larger ships, smaller ships, because that is what you expect an Armada to look like, a combination of different types of ships. So I really loved the imagery of that in what we saw. And I also like the fact that Laan appears again, but she's in another ship because, as we referred to in previous episodes of our talk, it just makes sense for the crew. This is an Armada. It's a Navy, Starfleet. It's a fleet for people to move on to other ships. So, like again in Star Trek, you see like the people stay in the same ship, and I don't think that's necessarily realistic. So I like the fact that you could see people. You see people on other ships. I'm like, okay, we're on Enterprise this season. We might be in the Farragut next season. Like I think that adds an element of reality that we haven't seen in some of the previous Trek shows. And I love the fact that we see the consequences of right man, wrong time, because as you clearly mentioned, it's Pike is the right man for many things, and his approach works. I mean, we saw he avoids a catastrophic world war in the first episode of the season, but he's not the right man for the Romulans. So you can be the right person at certain times, but universally you cannot be the right person all the time. And it's again, I just loved how they use balance, a homage to Balance of Terror to show, okay, this is the consequence of not having Captain Kirk in charge of the Enterprise. I mean, as Spock mentions, it was only 7 months from the incident, and there was no one there. And it's something that's been bothering me a little bit throughout the season, which I'm glad they addressed, which was the simple, basic solution for this conundrum was for Pike not to show up, and to tell the other cadets not to show up. I mean, he has advanced knowledge of the future. Why not use that knowledge to just not show up? And how it's not about Pike, it's about Spock. I like to think that nature and space abhor a vacuum, and apparently so does time as well, because someone's got to suffer in that accident. It just can't be left out there. So yeah, there was a lot of good here. Josh, was anything bad about the episode?
Thing bad?
Hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, we're over here.
Oh,
We hear
sorry.
you.
I don't think there was anything really bad about the episode in particular. I just want to reiterate a couple things. I liked what you said about that the Romulan ships were very different. Yes, that was a huge complaint about the season 1 finale of Picard, was that all the Starfleet and Romulan vessels just looked the same. It would have been really nice fan service to have had different types of Romulan ships. I was kind of hoping that they were going to bring back the Romulan Warbird from the TNG era, and just have them be more, beat up looking. So yeah, they wouldn't be all, or it might be the same class, but they'd all have different degrees of battle damage. And it would have been nice to have seen a lot of the newer Starfleet vessels, certainly in the season 1 opener of Picard. Yeah, we did get that. We got all the different new classes, and apparently found out that several older classes like the Excelsior are still around, or at least just specifically the original USS Excelsior herself was still around. But we also got to see, some Sovereign class vessels and the, the replacement for the Galaxy class vessel and all those ships, and of course the new Stargazer. So when you have especially a fleet like Starfleet, which is very diverse because it's multiple worlds in this group, and they all bring their own engineering designs. Yes, the ships are going to look very different. They're going to have different things that different races are going to add to these ships. Also, that Starfleet, is not a one size fits all. That you're going to need some types of ships to undertake certain types of missions, so they need to be built accordingly to meet those mission goals. And then there, so you want that, and that's a really cool thing. I it's one but overall, yeah, I don't really have a bad thing. I don't really have a complaint about it.
So
I thought it followed the original Ballads of Terror very well, without it becoming parody. And like I said, I loved how Paul Wesley, was able to play Captain Kirk without it being an impersonation of either Pine or Shatner. So, well done on that remark. So yeah, Chris.
So I do have a bad, which is ironically about Paul Wesley, which is not about the actor himself. I thought his portrayal of Kirk, he sort of made it his own. I mean, he had like sort of the Kirk mannerisms and the intenseness, which the role requires. But it's just bringing in Kirk at the end of season one. I mean, we all knew that he was going to be there in season two, and that brought some trepidation to me. And yes, it's necessary for how they constructed the episode to bring Captain Kirk in, because you have to see like whose approach was the right one. But overall, bringing in Kirk just still gives me some trepidation, and even more so now, um, because I view this as Pike's Enterprise, and it's just a huge distraction to have Kirk there. I mean, again, I think the Paul Wesley's portrayal was right. I think you needed him for this episode, but it's just the idea of having Pike there, and clearly at the end when you see that he's looking at his Starfleet record, he's probably going to ask for him to be assigned to the ship in season two. We know Paul Wesley is going to be part of the cast, but I am concerned about just how much you're going to use him, because it's just you got to be careful how much you're going to use Kirk, because by virtue of being Kirk himself, he's such a distraction.
Yeah, I know they kind of want to do that sense of prequel between Kirk and Spock specifically that we've never that we never quite got in the Kelvin timeline movies, because that was a different timeline. We want to see how did Kirk and Spock become best friends, and that they built this relationship of trust and everything that would run the gamut for the rest of their lives. And I know there's that, and maybe it could have waited to a later season, but I think that Kirk being there is going to affect Spock, I think, more long term than it's going to affect Pike, if that makes sense. But now, of course, we've had Uhura on this season in the beginning of her journey, which I'm a lot more interested in than I am Captain Kirk. That's for sure. Because I mean, the whole thing's been a lot of this has focused on him over the last 50 some years. So I'm glad that they're going to have more time to focus on Uhura. I just hope they keep that spotlight on her throughout the rest of the series, and that we also, see more of Pike's evolution. Because of course, as we've said, we never really got to know his story outside of the cage and the menagerie. So,
But okay, so I'm going to follow up on that. Speaking about stories, the other thing I didn't like is we didn't have all season an entry from Ortegas. I mean, we had T'Pring, which again I like because it was not someone from the crew, but we did not have an entry from Ortegas. I would have liked to had an episode. We never really had an episode focused on Ortegas. The other bad thing I would say is referencing back to something earlier. The design of the torpedo tubes. I mean, is this like a structural design flaw on all the starships? Because continuously they take a hit, and what's the first thing that goes out? It's the torpedo tubes. Like maybe they need to especially reinforce them, put them deep into the ship. But every time it seems, let's use the torpedoes. We can't. Like the torpedo tubes. Something has failed in the tubes. They took heavy hit damage. Like no, reinforce those. It seems like a structural flaw with the ships.
yeah, indeed. Yeah, that does seem like a huge flaw in Starfleet tactical design. Is you'd want the torpedo tubes to be more protected, because that's like, your main weapon right there, one of your two main weapons. So you want those protected, you want them protected, and the phaser array to be more protected, to be able to take those shots.
So
It definitely, yeah, it was definitely a huge flaw there. I mean, yeah, you do need a sense of dramatic tension to say, oh, the torpedo's down, we can't fire. Okay, well, this seems to happen way
way too
too
often.
often. Yes, you've gone to the well on that. I
Maybe
mean,
next.
I kind of like. There was something that happened on Next Generation. I'm gonna go to, the episode where Barclay became a super genius, and this thing was flying after the Enterprise that had done something to Barclay, and they were worried that it was going to incapacitate the rest of the crew and take over the ship, and they were trying to get away. It was matching its speed, and they needed the torpedoes, but it was too close, and they were worried about damage. And Barclay had used his super genius to reinforce the shields so that they could fire torpedoes and destroy this thing. I mean, you could do that, and you could say that. I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion. But you also, of course, you had the thing where, they had the one scene where Pike was worried about hitting, where Pike had a shot at the Romulan ship, but didn't take it because the Farragut was too close, and Kirk had to urge him to do it. And the shot paid off. They were able to hit the Romulan without causing further damage or loss of life to the Farragut, which, was what you wanted to do. But part of that was also Pike was hesitating. It wasn't, he's not a man, I think, that is used to hesitating. But I think he was caught in a situation. It's like, okay, what do I do here? Because I'm trying to, prevent this war, and well, it doesn't work. Of course, we know it does cause the war anyway. So
let's go on that thread for the Gorn part of our episode.
mhm.
I want to go back to the theme of tapestries
Yeah.
and also to a quantum string theory. That has the timeline been reset, or is there still an alternative branch now that still exists where we have an Admiral Pike and the Romulan War against the Federation is still going on? I mean, have things been reset, or do we now have an abyssal timeline, much like the Kelvin timeline?
We might. That is distinctly possible. I mean, if you go with the idea that every possibility that could happen throughout the multi-universe has or will happen, then yes, you have an alternate timeline where Pike does not go through does not have the accident, becomes an admiral, but Spock dies horribly, and the Romulan War goes on for a whole century, even drawing in the Klingons to a point where even the Klingons are sort of like, okay, this war is awful. This is not our kind of war, and we want to see it end. I mean, the fact is that the Klingons were ready to pull a whole John Connor here and send some warriors back to kill Pike at an earlier point before, he changes his timeline. But somehow the Pike of that timeline convinced them not to let him talk to him. It's like Pike said, there's very little that the Klingons don't want to settle with. There's very few problems that Klingons don't want to settle with a bat'leth.
Point of a bat'leth, yeah.
Yeah, and that would have been rather interesting, to say the least. So
if we go with, the fact that it's really Spock's death which is going to cascade even more, because you need Spock, because as Pike says, he needs to do several things, and the universe kind of does not like, as I said before, like a vacuum. Does it? Okay, we established that Pike could avoid his fate by just simply not showing up, right? But someone has to have a catastrophic accident to go into that chair. So I propose, does it have to be Pike? Do you feel the requirement if just you have someone show up and be damaged by the accident? I mean, could we see later on that a way to avoid his fate, because again, we have no fate but that which we make, and avoid a catastrophic war perhaps with the Romulans, now that he has this knowledge with him, is that he simply does not show up. Someone else, perhaps an Una, who has the capacity to heal all wounds, shows up in his place, has the accident, and then he just knows that he needs to step down from commanding the Enterprise. Can he still avoid his fate? I'm going to go out there and say, yes, I think he still can, because what this episode showed is two things. One, he should not be in charge of the Enterprise 7 months after the incident, and two, someone needs to be injured. But does that necessarily need to be him?
Well, Pike is certainly, now that he knows what would he need to do to evade this catastrophe himself. He
I mean, clearly
is not going to ask somebody else to do it.
He's seen that he can't. He himself can avoid it.
He has seen it, but he knows the price is quite awful, and he is not going to. That's not his way. He's not going to let Una or Spock or anybody else face that fate for him. And, I just now had a thought, and I want to throw this out there. There's a great old episode of The Twilight Zone. I can't think of the name of it, but it's about this old salesman who's like, he's on the street corner every day trying to sell stuff out of this suitcase. And the Grim Reaper comes along and announces that, you're going to die by tomorrow. And the salesman says, well, let me make one big sale. And then you could take me. Well, okay, fine. I'll let you do that. How long is it going to take you? Oh, it could take a few years. And the guy thinks he's avoided it. But then this little girl gets hit by a car and she's going to die. And the Reaper's like, well, I had to take somebody, so it's going to be her. And so suddenly the salesman's like, no, wait a minute. Hold on. I can make a big sale right now. And then you could take me in her place. Well, okay, but you got to make your sale. And so he starts selling Death all these ridiculous trinkets that are in his suitcase. And at the end, Death cannot take the little girl, so he has to take the salesman. And that's when I started just now thinking about it. That episode of The Twilight Zone popped in my head. And I start thinking about that. And I thought, yeah, why not? Why could it not be something like that? That he, Pike is not going to let somebody else, take his fate. He's just going to accept it. This is what's going to happen. And, there's no longer any way to avoid it. He's got to face it one way or the other. And,
well, we're getting close to our time, so let's talk about predictions for what we think will be next season. Josh, do you want to start?
Well, I think we're going to have Klingons. I think we are going to probably see more of Lieutenant Kirk.
Yeah.
Well, both Lieutenant Kirks, Sam and Jim. I think that Pike is going to go on a mission to save Una. I do not know what that's going to take. It's going to be hard to predict. I think we are going to see. Now, this is the big thing. I think we're going to see more of Sybok. And we're going to see what kind of impact he's going to have on Spock and T'Pring's relationship. I think it's going to be huge. I think we're going to find out. This is a prediction I've been kind of going on ever since we first heard that he's going to be on, that, he's the big villain in this. That he is going to be, that he's going to do something there. He's going to be what causes their eventual breakup. I think if Kirk is going to show up, I'm going to go on a real prediction here, because I don't think this was an accident that this happened. You have the character of Lieutenant Jenna Mitchell, the helms person or navigator, and I don't think it's an accident her last name is Mitchell, because of course we had the character of Gary Mitchell. So this may be retcon. Maybe she and Kirk have some sort of really close relationship. Maybe they were old friends at the academy. Maybe they're lovers or something. And she is, we're going to see that it's her destiny to become this guy like being, or maybe her brother is Gary. We don't know. We're gonna find out more about that. Finally, and I really like this idea you put in my head, and I really hope this is going to come to pass. The Gorn Klingon War. That would be an awesome way to bring the Klingons back. Is having a Gorn Klingon struggle that maybe Pike has to negotiate a peace to. We don't know, but that is something we should definitely think about. I think a lot of fans would love to see the Gorn and the Klingons go at it. I mean, I would even love a whole episode that would sort of parallel last week's episode where the Klingons go in batless, at the ready to, go through a wrecked Klingon ship and find these Gorn attacking them, and then they go at it. That would be quite awesome.
Well, I'm a huge proponent of anything Gorn. As you know, I would definitely applaud a Gorn Klingon war. Just because we never heard about it until now doesn't mean it didn't happen. I think next season we're going to get a log entry from Ortega's, and we'll get an Ortega's focused episode because we just didn't have one this season. I do not think, and this might be my hoping, but I do not think we're going to get Scotty. We're definitely going to get another engineer. I do not think it's going to be Montgomery Scott. It would be too soon, especially introducing Kirk. But we're definitely getting a new engineer. I think we're going to see more Robert April. I think Robert April is probably going to come into play regarding what happens with Una. I don't think it's just casually tossed out there when he said, I got a lot of pull. I think we're going to see just how much pull he has regarding her. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to see more Cybok, and we're going to more see the fabulous Captain Angel. I think we're going to see Captain Angel next season break Cybok out. I definitely think we're going to see that. I think that we're going to find out that the relationship between Pike and Captain Patel is now broken, and that Patel is Section 31. I think we're going to learn that the next season. And I think that we will see the band get back together somehow. We will see La'an return to the Enterprise. It's, I don't know how, but I don't think it's going to be the first or second episode. It might be like third or fourth, but I think that will eventually happen. I think that we're going to see a darker side to Mabenga. I think that's kind of hinted when he tells La'an in the previous episode, like, don't yell at my daughter. I think that there's some trauma that is beginning to emerge that perhaps has repressed whatever happened to his wife. That having the daughter is kind of a salve, but now that you don't have that anymore, I think we're going to see a darker side, and maybe that's going to also be the beginning of why we see a McCoy in future years. But I think the nice kind Mabenga that we see now, I think we're going to see a change next season. And I am just glad we have a next season, that it's already been filmed, and I know it's going to go into post-production. My prediction is that next year we'll start off with Picard, then we'll go to Strange New Worlds, and then we'll enter into Discovery. But I cannot wait. This season not only exceeded expectations, like blew my expectations away as it got hit full frontal by a volley of proton torpedoes.
Yes, and those photon torpedo tubes were working at the time.
They were working.
They were not damaged. So yeah, so this is it for Strange New Worlds, for New Frontiers and Strange New Worlds for this year. Yes, but never fear, fans. In 1 month, we will see the return of Star Trek Lower Decks,
which ended on its own cliffhanger.
It did, and I cannot wait to see that. Our friend Michael P. just announced Strange New Worlds panel at San Diego Comic-Con, so I'm sure he's going to bring us back a lot of exciting new information about that. And as we prepare to wrap up, we've got a couple of things we want to shout out. Chris, tell them about what's going on this weekend.
We do. So for people who are in the DC area, specifically Virginia around Crystal City, we have today the wrap up of BlurredCon. So if you have a chance, go to see the merger of Black community and the nerd community, BlurredCon. And we have some people that we are friends with, such as the people at Farpoint, who are there right now at their table. Go say hello to them. A great convention that happens in February. Hope some of you will consider going next year. But as far as conventions happening closer in time, where both Joss and I will be at, and Joss, I believe you will have a table there as well. We have Shore
Yes.
Leave coming up in, my God, just 5 days. It happens in Hunt Valley, Maryland. It's a fantastic show that has like great guests. It's going to have, for those of you who are fans of The Boys, who just wrapped up, A-Train is going to be there, Jesse T. Usser. For those of you like myself who are fans of Legends of Tomorrow, Brandon Ruth is going to be there. For the people who are Firefly and Serenity fans, Summer Glau is going to be there. For our Next Generation people out there, Gates McFadden is going to be there. And, for fans of Lower Decks, Robbie McNeil is going to be there. Catch up on, what's coming up in next season. As you know, he's an executive producer in the show. There are just a ton of people you want to see, including Jaws. So make sure to make it, if you can, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of next week to Hunt Valley, Maryland for Shore Leave. And there you go.
Yes, and here you go. Here's a copy of my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, by yours truly. And I will have my own table where I will be selling it. And I will also have some really exciting posters of the cover to give away. So please come visit me at my table. I will also be in costume. So you can come get pictures of me, talk to me about my book, talk to me about cosplay, talk to me about Strange New Worlds, Picard, Discovery, Lower Decks, Prodigy, or anything Star Trek related, Star Wars related, Marvel related. I'm happy to talk to people. And, and as we wrap up, I just want to say that any comments, I'm on Facebook at Josh Pritchett Jr., or you can reach me through the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group, which I also run. And, in case anyone's interested in joining that, we're a great group of people that just love to get together and talk all things Star Trek and pop culture related. Chris?
Thank you, Josh. Anyone who wants to follow me, you can go to Instagram, Birthday Cosplay. And I wish to thank everyone who, week in, week out, has watched the show. Thank you very much. I know there's a lot of other competing things on people's plates. So the fact that you watched this either live or a little bit later, we're deeply appreciative. And Josh, I am appreciative of your patience with me all throughout the last 10 weeks. And I look forward to doing this again in a few weeks for Star Trek Lower Decks.
Me too. And it's never been a problem, Chris. Thank you for being patient with me sometimes when I mispronounce names and look, it's the Klingon dialect. I can't help it. Okay. I just pronounce it, Klingon. I just kind of go back on that. So, okay. Well, until you see us again, either at Shore Leave or within about a month from now for Lower Decks, I am Josh Pritchett.
I am Chris Pabon. Peace and long life.
Kapla!